I do want to start by inviting you all to a brand new series that we're bringing you. It's called Rise and Shine. It's the Vacation Breakfast series. We are going across the US and including Hawaii and bringing you conversations just like we're having today. So we have 15 stops on our series. I've listed the first 4 here, and then there is a QR code that will take you to the landing page where you can get all the details about this series. But we have 15 stops where we are hitting the road and connecting with vacation rental property managers across the US, diving into some really wonderful topics that we know that you'll get something and learn something from. But I want to invite you today, if you have not already, you can pre-register for any of our events. I've got the first 4 upcoming dates. We will be in Palm Springs, California on Tuesday, June 25th. We will be in San Diego, California on Thursday, June 27th. We will be in Breckenridge on July 16th, and then we will be in Basalt, Colorado on July 18th. So I invite you all. There are future dates. If you click on the QR code, you'll be able to see our full calendar of where we're going. We do have dates we have not yet released yet, but we are planning to talk about AI impacts on vacation rentals, you benefiting from the OTA wars, innovative tools for business growth, and then specifically data trends and market impact, which is what we're talking about today. We will be diving into that deeper and focusing on the markets that we're in. So this is a sneak peek at what you'll be getting during the Rise and Shine series. And our very own Scott Leggett, who is part of our data group that is here with us today, will be at those California locations. And then we have Amber Knight, who is also on this webinar today, and she will be at the Colorado locations. But I first want to introduce Scott Leggett. If you have not met Scott Leggett yet personally, you're missing out. And I hope that you come and are able to connect with him on our upcoming series and any of the upcoming conferences we will be at. I've personally known Scott for over 15 years. He is the one I go to if I have any questions regarding vacation rentals, any data trends, anything revolving around government laws being put in place on short-term rentals. He is such a value, not only for me personally, but professionally. And I just want to thank him for being here today, and we'll get this started.
Thank you, Jordan. That's very kind of you. We're going to start out today with an update from the Vacation Data Group. We call it the VDG Group. And that's composed of Steve Karen, who's the Executive VP of the Vacation Division, and myself, Tim Woodward, and Amber Knight. And what you could probably describe this group as a group of data geeks, data nerds. We find a lot of joy and excitement in digging into nuggets of data and correlating different pieces of information and really look at it as a big kind of detective exercise, a forensic exercise, if you will. And we use multiple data sources, but the ones that we cherish the most actually are the ones that we get right from our Inhabit clients through the Data Insight product that many of you subscribe to. If you don't subscribe to that, please consider doing so. There's a free version of it. It'll give you a lot of information, things that you can take a peek in at your leisure. But with that said, we're going to turn the time over to Tim and Amber to give us a market update. And then later we'll be joined by Justin.
Thank you, Scott. So first we want to talk about what our agenda looks like for this summer update. The first thing we want to do is just take a little bit of a fresh look and a reminder for everybody on something we do every day, and that's measuring market performance. Then we'll take a look with Tim on the 2024 market update. And after we talk about the update, we'll go through critical strategies for market performance. What are the new trends and what has changed? And then Justin Gilbert will talk to us about travel trends and the power of brand. So one of the more important things that we want to look at that has been a recent piece here is to talk about understanding all the factors in your market. And this is including more and more factors that any one data provider or report that you have is going to provide for you. When we look at data right now, we see 2 really big buckets. We see the professional property managers, and we have really great data on that from LSI and then also from Key Data. But then we also look at non-professional property managers or non-professional hosts that are on Vrbo and Airbnb and these other OTAs. If they're, you want to really understand what percentage of the market is professional and what percentage of the market is non-professional, so that you can look at the data accurately, because there is data available that's scrape data for these non-professional hosts, but it's less accurate. But also, if 30% or more of your market is non-professional, that is going to impact your ADR and how many fees you can charge and all sorts of things. I do think that there's a lot more opportunities in those markets that have more non-professional hosts, and you're able to grow your market share a lot faster in those markets. So there's less data, but more opportunity is generally what I've seen. And then on the other side of this, another factor that we have here are local and remote operators. And so what I'm talking about here are property managers that are in market managing properties, and property managers that are not in market managing properties remotely. So the level of service here, again, it's an opportunity, but you do want to understand how homeowners are being serviced, how guests are responding. Knowing this in your market specifically, it's not really something that is going to show up on a report, right? And then the next piece that I'm going to look at is traditional vacation rental managers versus, and I'm going to, and maybe not even versus, but, we're really kind of almost trying to find the words for this. We have property managers that are doing things that are in market, that are in all the professional reporting. And then we have brand focus, much more like they operate in much more like hotels and in a lot more urban markets. And they're operating differently. They're using different tools, they're using different resources. And they almost, on the side of it right now, I'm seeing these two groups almost treating each other like different industries. And one of the things that we need to do is learn the best of what other people in your market are doing and other people in our industry are doing, so that we can improve and mature as an industry as a whole. So know what percentage of your market is each piece of these, and know what they're doing. The more informed you are, the better you can make decisions that improve your business. The next piece of that is to really understand the reports that you're looking at. Again, referring to that first slide, know what's included in the data that you're looking at and the reports you're looking at, and know what's missing from that, and really be aware. Knowing what's missing is really critical. Diversify what you're looking at. Diversify what you know about the other tools that are available that maybe aren't as valuable for you, and look at them again. This market, and especially data in the short-term rental space, is constantly evolving. So if you haven't checked a report or a tool in 6 months, it's time to go back and look at it again and reassess its value to your market. And then one of the other pieces that I would say is don't bite off too much to start. Start small and build on that. It's much easier to do that than and try to spend 15 minutes a day at least on this, and then build from that. If you try to spend 2 hours on it, it's overwhelming and it's too much, and you're probably not going to build a habit. And it's more important to start small and build a habit than go seriously in depth occasionally. And then this is, I'm going to say, one of the more important ideas that we, really want to look at. And I know this is obvious, but if you've got an abundance of inventory in your market, you want to drive occupancy, and you drive occupancy by dropping ADR, and that will improve your RevPAR. Now, on the other side of it, if you have a shortage of properties and you have more guests looking for properties, you can drive ADR. But in most markets, we're shifting right now to needing to drive occupancy. So really understand, hitting last year's ADR will lower occupancy. So really be prepared to drop your ADR aggressively in order to increase occupancy, in order to get the best results.
And if I jump in, Amber, this was one that we had, and kind of tying this to the RevPAL, the revenue per unit. Really, you can look at each of these numbers, but they work together, and you can kind of measure that with the revenue per unit, unless you're dealing with a lot of inventory shifts. And inventory has really been growing in the last few years. So the revenue per unit can be a little more challenging to measure, especially against the market. Obviously, when you look at your own data, you can compare your revenue this year versus last year. You can't do that in the market. But there's that, don't get wrapped up in, well, we're trying to get the best ADR because you could be hurting your occupancy, or we're trying to boost our occupancy you could hurt your ADR. When there's a high demand, both numbers go up. We saw that a few years ago with COVID. If it's a really low demand, sometimes you see both numbers drop, but usually the change in one pushes the other direction, and it's finding that right balance. And I think you'll see that in some of the data numbers we have coming up here.
Guys, just real quickly, it occurs to me some people may not be familiar with these terms. So just a quick definition of ADR, RevPal, and any other metrics that you go through would be helpful, I think.
Sure, yeah. So I mean, the three we'll really hit today is I use occupancy, or when you see it in this presentation, it's adjusted paid occupancy. So we take the number of nights that were booked, divide it by the number of units, but we exclude anything that was blocked off for like maintenance or an owner or something like that. So it's a true measurement of how much was rented that could be rented. ADR stands for average daily rate. That's just how much money you made divided by the number of nights you rented. And then the revenue per unit is just taking your overall revenue and dividing it by how many, units you had in that time period. So all great measurements.
Yes, wonderful.
And that takes it into me with the data update. And just going to kind of jump into some wider things here we'll see. And this is kind of why we were just talking about the ADR and occupancy here. So this is year to date. We're looking at 2024 versus 2023. This is for all the US. So as you can see, occupancy, the blue line, the dotted, dash blue line is last year. Occupancy is up for pretty much all the year. It's tightening up a little bit later on in the year when we get, back into the fall type months. It gets a little tighter at this moment. We've got a few comments about that later on, but on the whole, the average daily rate has held just below last year for the whole year. So we were comfortable enough with that to say, as a country, as the US, average daily rates pretty much holding flat. The adjusted occupancy is up. Inventory is up. We mentioned that, and we've got a couple slides in the next here. And then the revenue per unit is down. So it's positive. We're not, nothing's going down. Obviously, everybody wants to see numbers go higher. The occupancy increase was probably the most positive thing I saw all of this, because it just says that people still want the vacation. They're wanting to rent, and they're renting it at the same rate. So I think we're starting to find that sweet spot where things are kind of, settling back down a little bit in the market. We mentioned the revenue per unit. We're a little behind where we were last year. For the US, it's not bad. That's maybe about $5,000 at the worst there in July, a little bit there in April that we hit in a second here. It's not bad. Inventory is the biggest factor here. And talking about inventory, this is inventory average number of units per property manager across the US. We're seeing almost 15, 20% increase in, property managers. Some of the highest ones here was close to 20. And that's sometimes coming from other places that maybe are losing units, or it's people that have decided to put units in the market. They're building stuff, trying to capitalize on the vacation market. That is starting to cool over the last few years. It's keeps dropping a little bit less from month to month, but there's still a lot of inventory coming into the market. And then kind of wanted to do the same numbers, but keeping in mind what you saw for the US. And this is really kind of to go back and emphasize the points of, understanding your reports and what they're reporting on. And then, Amber mentioned starting small, it's not only for the time, but looking at just your data, whether it's your town, your county, your beach, your, whatever destination is, focusing on that. So we're going to kind of hit the same markets here, but you can see a little bit of the difference in the each. So we're looking at the Southeast here. So that includes all the states up here you can see with the red. The average daily rate is, other than a little bit in April, it's just behind last year, and occupancy is up for the entire year. So they're looking, from a performance standpoint, that's looking very positive for them. And their revenue per unit is actually coming pretty close. So for the Southeast, that looks really good. If I look at somewhere like the mountain states, they're holding very close to last year on their ADR again also, and their occupancy is up. But you can see it's totally different times of the year that they're seeing their rate peaks, because it's a different market. Their RevPal is very impressive. They're holding right at where they were last year. So the occupancy shift is enough to match with the inventory shift. So, good numbers there. Looking at the Pacific, and this one probably has about, a half a dozen asterisks through it. that you could reference. Average daily rate is a lot lower than last year. Their occupancy is up. You noticed in this August, you start to get a lot more time, tighter on things. Hawaii being part of the Pacific market and the impact of the Maui fires definitely plays factors in not only how the beginning half of 2024 is performing comparatively, because you do have less units. There is still growth in that market, but there's a lot of influence, and you can see that also here in the revenue per unit. It's just there, the rest of the year is still yet to come, but they're performing a lot down from what they were last year in the revenue per unit. Amber, you had made a mention of Maui earlier. Did you have anything to add there, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were looking at data earlier that said the island of Maui has 900 fewer properties available for rent than it did last year. And just because of all of the factors with the fire and alternative housing and whatnot, it's a huge impact. And so when we see that the fact that the inventory is up, but for the Pacific states, and that includes the big changes in Hawaii, that really tells you how much additional inventory is in the market. And it's, understanding how much inventory is in the market, that says that what that does is, and of course we all know this, but guest demand gets spread across more properties, which decreases how many reservations each property gets. And, I see this is coming up with the Q&A, the questions, like being able to explain this to your homeowners clearly and often is critical.
Yeah, setting those expectations with the homeowners should be almost the number one job as far as an owner.
Absolutely. An ounce of proactive action is worth a cure of, is worth a pound of cure, right? So talk to owners early and often about these terms. Make sure they're familiar with it. Make sure they know how much more inventory is in their market than what it used to be.
Yeah, I worked with a person, I call it the Star Trek approach, the Scotty answer, under promise and over deliver. Tell them it's going to be this, and then it's better, and they're happy with you. So,
yeah.
All right. Southwest, similar here, this seems to, the one thing that we noticed in the Southwest is ADR really seems to be driving this market. Their occupancy is up for the year, but their ADR is down. So that's kind of a market to drive their occupancy. They've had to bring their ADR down a little bit. That's a different trend than you're seeing a lot of other markets where the ADR is on, with what it was last year, but the occupancy is coming up. So this is one that you probably, this market probably needs to be a little more focused on ADR and not as much on marketing and trying to get more guests. And you can see that revenue per unit is down. Northeast trending very close to last year also, really looked good there with everything, even up on their average daily rates in some places. So I thought that was very positive for them. And Midwest, similar, they actually did really good the first half of the year with their average daily rate staying good. Their occupancy has been up for the year. A little bit of ground to make up from where they were last year, but I know that's the Midwest. You get a lot tighter booking windows. It's kind of travel season, but not everybody goes to the Midwest for the summer. So not bad, but there is a little bit of work to do there. And again, the revenue per unit.
And this really is, I'm going to say the Midwest is an expanding market. Like there's a lot of properties there that are not professionally managed and that are becoming more professionally managed and becoming a bigger and bigger piece of this data set.
Yeah. And I wanted to throw in here a couple slides about Easter. And I'm only really doing this because Easter and spring break, it has come to us 2 or 3 times with, did April undo everything that happened in March? We made all these gains in March, and then it was well, it's because Easter moved and everything else, and it was in a different month, and with spring break, and there's some different factors that is true and that isn't true, and a lot of it is market based. Some people said, well, there's more incentive to travel if because it's Easter and spring break. So it's well, we can definitely travel because we're off school, we got spring break, or we want to do that. Other people said, oh, well, being separate was better because it was 2 opportunities to get guests. It varied. And I think a lot of people may not have handled their rates exactly right for Easter. So what happened was last year, Easter was in the middle of April, a lot later than a lot of schools traditionally have their spring break. This year, it was right at the end of that spring break season, and it was in March. So what we saw happen was the occupancy, the blue here, we chose Easter colors, sorry. 2024 is the blue, 2023 is last year. So the occupancy was up, but the rates were down. And what we did is we trying to combat, well, was it April stealing from May or March and everything else? we combine both months into one set comparison too here. So if I've got, this is my March and April. So like we had 42% occupancy over the 2 months, but we had 37 and 46 independently. It's kind of a way to normalize the data. We ended up, if I'm going to look at the revenue per unit, the biggest thing to see here was it ended up being, truthfully, about $500 less per unit over the 2 months. So did Easter moving impact that, and Easter not being matched up more with spring break weeks? Potentially, yes. But then I said, well, let's look at this a little bit by market. So if I look at the Southeast and I look at the same kind of numbers, similar type performance, but the difference is only about $150 per unit in revenue per unit. So while Easter was a big thing, and you look at some of the reports and say, oh my gosh, this has killed our numbers for the year and it's bad stuff. If you're in the Southeast, it's not nearly as bad as what was being talked up. Likewise, now if I look at the Pacific and I run through their numbers, they were actually $1,500 short per unit. So there's a little more impact to there. So you can take from those what you want, but I mostly wanted to kind of address the Easter issue, but also just make this the point of why you should dive into your data for your market and how it affects you specifically, and don't react to a report or a trend you see and say, well, we must don't make a business decision off of a trend or summary you saw. So
absolutely. I think one of the bigger things that we can look at is that, as far as trends from this information, it's important to be proactive about July now. You want to drive more occupancy rather than holding out for higher ADR in most markets, but know your market and know when to make those decisions, because that window is closing on your expiring inventory. Go through and, you want to be proactive about July, but you want to watch August week by week. How does August look? What can you do? What are the comparisons? Back to school makes this a really tricky piece, and it changes every year. So work through this, make sure that you're looking at this, you know what it looks like. You're talking to homeowners about it now so that you can make changes and make sure that they're, maybe if you've got a sticky owner that doesn't want to change your ADR, you can tell them your occupancy is going to be down. Do you want me to fix it now, or do you want to watch it happen? Right. And again, this leads to driving occupancy. Any strategies you can come up with to drive occupancy will increase your overall revenue per unit. The other thing that you're going to see is a lot of these smaller operators, these semi-professional operators that were there having lots of fun when business was good, they're going to be making adjustments in their market, and you're going to see some of them leaving the market. So know which properties in your market are on your top 10 list, your top 20, be the first ones they call when it's time to pick up those properties. And, following up through that, have a strategy and a plan for fall. People tend to book for fewer nights, for shorter stays, but kind of know what that looks like for your market and have an idea. Generally, if you can speak to this and you've got an elevator pitch for what July and August and your fall look like, you've got a pretty good idea on what your strategy can look like, and come up with ideas and keep asking those questions to yourself and to your team to optimize the rest of the year. So then we'll talk about really some of the critical strategies that you need to perform in your market. And this is where we're going to get to. Some of this is long-term, some of this is short-term. We really want to talk about building your brand as a really compelling method to generate more reservations. If your guests think of you when they think about visiting your market, they're going to book with you, right? That involves building an identifiable brand, regular outreach, strong guest service, remarketing. This is a plan. So this will help you get, additional guest remarketing, additional bookings. Measure what that looks like, analyze your data, and, rinse and repeat, right? And make sure that those reservations you're getting, you're maximizing your revenue for each reservation, for each property. You know what that looks like. I'm also going to say know what profitability looks like on each property, so that you're able to really focus on, adding additional services, adding additional value to your properties to increase that reservation per unit, and make sure that your properties are the most appealing to existing and new guests. And so this is your endless cycle, right?
and this was a balance. You have to do both sides. You can't just do revenue management. You can't just work on your brand. You have to do both. It's a balance.
We're in the hospitality business, right? If guests feel great about their trip, and they're excited about what's going on and they think of you when they think about that great trip, they will tell all their friends about it and they will come back. Then we're going to talk about revenue management because there's a lot of pieces of revenue management here. And we like to get very analytical on the data side. And we like to talk about the things that we can measure and the things that we can see and what we can automate. And so we talk about automated pricing and analytics and performance all the time, right? But I want to also talk about these overlooked components of revenue management, and it's much more holistic than that. Take a look at your units. Have a leaderboard and look at that and understand who are your top performing properties? What are your bottom performing properties? Which ones are doing better this year versus last year? Which ones have more owner holds this year than last year, right? Understand that and understand which properties drive your revenue and which ones cost money. Watch out for leading indicators, okay? A lot of this is reporting. New bookings. Are your bookings up year over year? You know, what are the factors in the market that would affect the future performance, but don't necessarily show up in your data yet, right? Non-professional hosts, those, you know, things like this. Like there's a lot of things that tell you about the future you don't necessarily see in your reports. Sometimes our reporting is about what has happened already, right? Additional services. Increasing your revenue per reservation is important, but you want to make sure that you're adding value for guests. So this is extra, you know, extra cleans, you know, firewood, adding insurance. What are the services that guests are looking for that they're willing to pay for that you can use to increase your revenue per reservation, right? Make sure that you're looking at constantly adding additional training for you and your team. This industry is evolving so quickly that it requires continuous education. There's a lot of resources out there that are available. You're in this call already, which is a great resource, but be sure and reach out and talk to the experts in the field and just pick their brains constantly. Be curious, right? And then you want to look at your holistic pricing on different OTAs and what your holistic marketing looks like. Your listings, are they optimized? This is, again, it's a balance, but it's a constant like wheel of components that contribute to overall performance. Yeah. And then we want to talk about something I think this is really important. And it's something that when business is good, we don't think about enough, is building resilience through branding and the power of branding. You know, one of the things that we see is that we see a push from OTA to commoditize our short-term rentals, our portfolios, so that they're all interchangeable. And so just kind of making sure, are your properties differentiated? Is your guest experience differentiated so that when guests think of your market, they think of you, right? And to build on that, we would like to bring in Justin Gilbert from our partners to talk about travel trends and the power of brand and what, you know, some of the leading edge ideas that are happening in the industry.
Before we introduce Justin here, there have been several questions going back and forth. I've tried to keep up with as many as I could in the chat, but what I will say to you is that a lot of them have to do with where to find data and information. And you can get in touch with Tim Amber or myself. We're happy to address those questions one by one with you. And there isn't anything that's been asked that I don't think that we can't find the answers for you. So I'd like to introduce Justin Gilbert. And I have to tell you a little bit about this guy because I probably go to as many conferences, I think, as anybody in the industry. And I happened to go to one in Puerto Rico early this year. It was jointly sponsored by the Puerto Rico STR Association and the Territory Tourism Agency or Tourism Board there. I'm not sure I can recall exactly what that's called. But anyway, it was one of the best surprises I've had this year. It was a great conference. Just exceeded my expectations in every way. The venue was outstanding. The speaker lineup was great. The organization was excellent. Everything was really well done. But probably the most pleasant surprise I got was during the opening session when Justin Gilbert did the keynote. And I immediately thought as I was listening to him, we need to get this guy on one of our webinars. And I didn't leave the room that day until I had a commitment from Justin that he would join us at some point. So Justin is the Senior VP of Strategy and Insight at R&R Partners. They specialize in consulting with TDAs, DMOs, destination marketing organizations, and helping them craft their marketing as well as their strategy, and just full of wonderful insights. And so with that, I'm going to let Justin take over and live up to that introduction.
Well, thank you very much, Scott, and the entire Inhabit team for inviting me to be a part of this and for raising the bar very high. So I hope I get to deliver an insightful and interesting presentation for all of you. And thank you again to the Inhabit team. So I'm going to dive right into this. Hopefully this screen share is working. So far, so good. I'll look for a thumbs up from the Inhabit team. All right, so we're going to cover 5 things relatively quickly today. We can also share this deck out afterwards through the Inhabit team. But at a very high level, we're going to talk about the state of travel, frankly, globally, but particularly in the US right now, how it's changed in purpose. I'm going to talk a little bit about some key travel trends that are happening and shaping the category right now on a consumer side. Then we'll turn a little bit more into vacation rentals, talk some about the trends there and the opportunities for vacation rentals to really continue to grow their market share, continue to grow revenue. And then, as you can guess, as we talked about right now, the power of your brand and really talking about behavioral branding, particularly in hospitality, about how that can both deepen loyalty, trust, and that kind of repeat visitation that we're looking for while finding those ancillary sources to grow revenue. And then we'll close out with some key implications in question and answers. So I'm going to drive right through unless someone stops me, but we're going to start with the state of travel. And what I'll say about this, and this is based on all the data, all the interviews that we're doing and looking at, we've really entered a new era of travel where it's more important and valued than in any time ever in human history. Part of that is technology that's making it easier for us to travel and adapt more quickly. Some of that is scalability. Some of that, frankly, is having to shelter in place for over a year, and nothing about like that will make you realize how much you value being out there. But we've continuously seen data that I'm about to show you right now that suggests that for people, travel's really at the gone from the top of the want list to the bottom of the need list. Things like food and shelter are going to come first, but in terms of discretionary spending, it's really a priority for people. Starting here with some data from Amex, when they look at literally the US travel population, nearly 4 out of 5 now are saying that travel is an important budget priority for them. It is up there with planning rent and utilities and internet and things like that. And more so, it's not just that travel's important, but in terms of where are we going to put those dollars, caring more about the experience than the cost of the trip. They really want to have an experience that's worth that time, the savings, the value, and they're willing to prioritize the spend in the category. When we look out at 2024 compared to 2023, and it's probably a little interesting given the continued economic uncertainty, but 84% are saying they plan to spend more or the same traveling in 2024 than in 2023. So cuts may be happening other places in lifestyle. There's also the element of travel financing we'll talk about real quick, but people are still traveling and they're not looking to cut back on this line item right now if they can avoid it. In fact, and this was broken out across all friend groups, they specifically even asked it about your daily cup of coffee. But again, almost 75%, 72% said they'd rather save for travel than spend it going out with friends. That's just how important this freedom of mobility and having an experience and getting out there in the world really is for people. So for this industry, there's never been a better time to be where we are right now and be, particularly in this space, places that people want to go to and get people there in a way that they're really looking for in their experience. So at a high level, starting with state of travel. Next, talking about some travel trends. And you can think about these. These are broad consumer trends that are really kind of shaping what people are looking to do in the category. And the first big trend I'm going to call out is actually a bunch of little trends, which is that niche travel has really gone wide. Rather than there being 4 or 5 core drivers of travel like adventure, escape, relaxation, now there are dozens and dozens of different interests that are driving demand. I'm sure some of you have seen stories about people flying to Paris to see Taylor Swift because it was more affordable than seeing Taylor Swift here. But there's everything we'll talk about, from astrotourism to family bonding to skip gen travel to all these things that people are looking to do, and travel becoming more of a mechanism to enhance the experience versus even doing things at home. People are finding, rather than places to go, reasons to travel, if you will. And there's a lot of different reasons behind it. One of the biggest shifts we have seen, not just in travel, but globally has been what we've seen with remote work. We had about 7 to 8% of the US population offered some form of remote work prior to the pandemic. Now that's up to around 38%, some estimates as high as 40, a high 40% that have some form of remote work. And with that is this rise of blended travel. The fact that people can work from anywhere, particularly important in this market. We are seeing increasingly people traveling longer, traveling and staying for longer, and looking to truly immerse in destinations and blend the idea of work with travel rather than plan a dedicated vacation, getting 2 weekends that sort of bookend a week, maybe taking 1 or 2 of those days off, working in the middle and combining those together, which is an enormous opportunity for the vacation rental market. One that's, probably an emerging trend for vacation rental is solo travel. It's something that's really popped off again post-pandemic. People are looking to take their own travel, even if they're in relationships, if they have families, people looking for weekends or weeks to go out there and kind of reconnect with themselves. And we'll see in the data in a second, while that's not the largest part of vacation rentals, particularly for some smaller units and more remote places, it is something people are still looking for those units for. Another big one, I'm sure we all saw it early this year with people traveling for the eclipse, this sort of excursion and astrotourism. A lot of people want to get further out too, not just be in a big city. They want to be closer to nature, smaller towns, kind of abutting natural forests and national parks and things like that. And even the ability to kind of go out there and get into different latitudes to observe these celestial events, which is an opportunity in its own right. Something that's always a driver in travel is gastronomic travel. People are really looking to kind of get into the food and drink of the places they visit and literally consume culture. So ways to find to tap into what makes the areas that your properties in unique and draw that kind of gastronomy into it is a huge opportunity to kind of deepen that connection. Another sort of smaller interesting trend we've seen is something called skip gen travel. This is another sort of post-pandemic thing where we've actually seen a sort of grandparent-grandchildren trips where grandparents will actually go and they want to have a slower form of travel, but spend more time with their grandchildren they have, and sometimes even go without the parents. I know in our agency, every time we say this to the parents, they get very excited about this idea of skip gen travel that lets them do their travel. But it's something we're seeing on the rise. With that, purpose and connection, certainly families, but people are looking inward too. Sometimes it's about going to a place that's different, but really focusing on yourself, that connection with your family, your friends, each other. That's another motivator in travel. And then something I'm pretty sure some of you have read about is also destination dupes. For those that are becoming a little bit more value conscious, that maybe wanted to go to Paris or maybe wanted to go wherever, they're looking for destinations that might offer similar climate, similar culture, similar vibes, if you will, but maybe they're going to be able to find better deals, or even absent that, just avoid the crowds. Like if you're in anywhere in, France or, for example, Italy right now, or some of the big cultural destinations, you're getting packed right now with people. So people looking for those. And 2 other ones, spontaneating and saying yes. We are still seeing a ton of short booking windows, decisions made in less than a week in some cases, where something opens up. Again, some of this driven by remote work, but people are taking trips with little to no planning, really embracing the sense of living in the moment. There's a lot that psychologically changed over us for the last few years. We sort of feel like you can't take anything for granted, that any moment can kind of change into something else. And so this idea of people making those last second decisions is an opportunity as well. And then lastly, I'm not going to talk about this in depth today, but I know I talked about it at the conference Scott was at that I mentioned, but I'm sure you all have seen things like Affirm and other buy now, pay later programs. These new model of financing expenses where you break, say a trip into multiple monthly payments are really becoming popular across generations, across income spectrums and travel segments, where people who may not be able to book a trip now because it would add up to too much are looking to these financing mechanisms to have the travel they want now and kind of fractionalize that out into a monthly payment. So you go to book and it's $3,000, and then there's an offer of, hey, you know what, $300 a month, $3,600, you can have that trip right now. So turning window shopping and again into a faster purchase. So that's it at kind of a high level. Now I want to kind of talk a little bit more, being mindful of time, about vacation rentals, and then I really just want to spend a little bit of time talking about brand, because that's where I focus a lot of my energy, is helping our clients, and particularly in hospitality, think about what a brand really means. So we'll just talk briefly about some vacation rental trends and then go to that. Starting with some key demographics, really looking at where we're seeing sort of people coming at hotels versus vacation rentals, if this will work. So as expected right now, hotels still have a leading edge as expected from inventory and otherwise, but we've been seeing this grow over years with vacation rentals taking up more share of the market. We're seeing, as one might expect, a little bit of a differential in terms of demographics, in terms of age ranges. You're seeing more Gen Z and adults and millennials be a little bit more up into vacation rentals than hotels. Gen Xers are still there with about the population, boomers a little bit less, although that very much varies. If you're having a higher end accommodation, certainly a vacation rental is still rising up there. It totally depends on the unit. And really kind of scaling with income range, which is also scaling with travel. There's really no difference. We're seeing roughly in the same proportion those by income range staying in vacation rentals and hotels, and similar patterns for rural and suburban as well, continuing to see the same sort of patterns there. I think the big takeaway from this slide is there's an opportunity to grow across a number of segments, but don't discount those younger travelers and those higher income travelers. In terms of accommodation planning, for those that know in advance, we're seeing, going back to that spontaneity, just over half of adults saying they know in advance where they want their accommodations to be. Even at the highest point, it's about 67% of those making 100K plus. And then beyond that, it's 60, 50, even below that, with everyone else either saying they don't know or they want to do more research. What that means is until that booking is there, there's an opportunity for that conversation to convert. If they're not locked in on a hotel or a particular unit yet, there's an opportunity to draw that customer in. And we're going to talk about that in the branding section, how important that early communication really is. And then we're just going to talk briefly here about kind of the key factors that are driving decision-making. This is now for short-term rentals for Morning Consult. And I'm going to go through this a little quickly to kind of hit the key points. And you can see at the bottom, we'll share this deck out later, but a triangle is Gen Z adults, a diamond is millennials, and so forth. Unexpected, of course, at the top is price, right? Price is certainly a major factor for Gen X and boomers. It's still a top factor for millennials and Gen Z, although they're a little bit more willing to be flexible and find financing for their travel. Location, winds up being second most important. Certainly, again, for those younger travelers, it's a little bit less. They're kind of looking for that deal. Those older travelers have a little bit deeper sense of where they want to go. Safety winds up being a factor across the spectrum, but again, a little bit more on some of those older travelers. And then rate flexibility. Where we start seeing things pop out is there's an opportunity as we start thinking about brand for vacation rentals, is we start getting into like the amenities, the service, the host rules, the aesthetic, and so forth. We can see, we talk about that blended travel, people being on the road more, the importance of little things like, Wi-Fi that's high speed, that is consistent and operational. Amenities is something that's really growing up there, not as much for Gen Z, but you can see clustered up there about half of every other generation. They want something to do. They're looking for a nice unit, but they're looking for something, whether it's on property or nearby, with guidance that they can experience, to let go and be a part of. So they want, they're not expecting that hotel experience, but they're hoping that there's something that can happen there. There's a mindful eye on service and cleaning fees, not just the fees, but making sure that the actual service and cleaning is there for it. Certainly looking at the space itself. Guest reviews are an enormous part of that. We continue to see that is word of mouth as one of the top drivers, and it's going to be critical as we talk about the brand section. Another area that continues to be important is also the check-in, check-out. Not just the rules for it, but that frictionless process. Is it easy to find, easy to get things? Are things set up the way they want? Can I drop my bags and go? Or is it going to be more complicated than that? The host rules and guidelines. I know I'm talking to people who are professionally managed companies and so forth. Something that I'm sure you all are aware of that comes up in a lot of forums and so forth. People that want to be respectful of those rules and guidelines. They also want to feel like they're having that positive experience and they don't have that 2-inch long binder of things they're supposed to do. And then lastly is aesthetic and workspace. You have people staying longer. In a lot of cases, people going, again, working from these locations. So by no means the top priorities, you kind of see these things connect. But the overall vibe, the energy, if you're going to be working out of there and spending more time in there, is going to be something that's really important. And then you can just kind of see that same thing reflected here. The dark bar is really where vacation rentals have people agree that they do it better. The light bar is where hotels do it better. And you can see space quality, actually an edge for vacation rentals. It's about tied in comfort and location. The opportunity is getting really there when you start seeing amenities, customer service, and safety, right? That's where hotels still have a bit of an edge right now, and that's where the opportunity for the brand really comes in. And then last thing I just want to say about the data is who's traveling by party composition. And not as expected, you've got larger groups, smaller groups, about in the same proportion traveling. Those who are traveling alone, solo travel, taking up less of that, and then those with children taking up a larger portion of it. I'll skip through sort of these regional data points because I don't think they're overly relevant to right now, but pretty much consistent where we're going. And again, relative to hotels, the longer the stay, the more the competitive advantage that a vacation rental is going to have. We see that in all of our data. When you get past 5+ nights, that's really when you're entering your sweet spot. And again, it's a great place to be right now with blended travel. People are taking longer trips and they're looking to immerse more in the destinations and the places they're visiting. They're looking to combine work with it. So that helps a lot as well. But the last thing I'm going to touch here, you see it here with blended and business, is I just want to touch real quick on business. It's not the first thing you think of when you think about vacation rentals, but increasingly it's something that people are looking at. This is from American Express as well, but just over a quarter of business travelers are actually willing to consider a short-term rental or a vacation rental for a number of different factors. And you can look at the market to kind of validate this, because looking in the same pipeline, you're seeing hotels now, when they look at what are they developing right now, well, almost 40% of new hotels are actually extended stay. They're looking for these 5+ week-long or more stays. So they understand the market is going there. And it's another reason why a quality brand, a quality vacation rental, you're positioned in the right place to kind of grow against that trend. So I know I'm kind of going through a lot, but I'm going to go through power of brand and then kind of hit key implications, and hopefully we'll have a few minutes for questions and I can hand it back to the Inhabit team. But we talked a lot about brand, and so this is where I want to slow down for just a minute and hit some key points. What I do day to day is work with clients, whether it's destinations, hotels, property associations, any sort of brand, et cetera, and talk about what a brand is and the power that has to drive equity, to boost revenue, to drive loyalty, and et cetera. And it's something I want to talk about today. And something that I'm fond of saving, that we believe strongly in my agency, is that brands are behavior. You can think about a brand as your logo, your mark, your name, sure. You can even think about your brand promise and your communications. But what a brand is, particularly when it comes to hospitality, is how you behave. And that is across every single touch point. You have this brand promise, but how you behave in your communication, in your interactions, and establishing the space before, during, and after the stay, all of that comes together to really form that impression of your brand and to create that competitive advantage. And it's more important forever right now in hospitality. So talking about the kind of 3 components to build to that, it really starts with your brand promise. For those of you that are running these professional managed organizations, I assume you have something like this, but your brand promise, that is what you feel you can uniquely deliver to your customers better than anyone else in your market, right? That's setting the expectations. That's raising the bar to stand out from the crowd, but it's going to make you matter more. From there comes that behavior that we just talked about. It's that empathy, it's that attentiveness, it's that proactiveness. It's meeting and exceeding those expectations you've set through every step of the guest journey, which ultimately leads to trust, which we're going to talk about right now in a second, because trust, particularly in hospitality right now, is critical. It's what drives loyalty. Trust is a guest belief that for all the time, all the money, the energy, the sacrifice, the hassle often of getting to a place, that they're trusting the experience they're going to have, the place they're looking at, is going to pay off. And that is something that is in major decline throughout the travel category right now. And it's why it's such a powerful competitive advantage if you can build a brand around that. How so? Looking at Edelman right now, every year they do a trust barometer. Consumers say that 71% say it's more important to trust brands they use today than in the past. That's a belief in declining quality and experience. Building on that, 67%, 2/3, are more likely to stay loyal to and advocate for a brand they trust. Talking about the space we're in right now, the ability to not just visit that property again, but other properties in your portfolio and look for that mark, knowing they're going to have a good experience. When they recommend to their friends, their family to stay with your brand and advocate, the referral business that comes with that is absolutely huge. Almost 3/4 say they find a brand that increases security more attractive than adventure. In this case, security doesn't just mean physical security. It means security in terms of frictionless, in terms of confidence that they're not going to have to change their plans or have to adjust accordingly. Nearly 80% say they uncover things that make them loyal to a brand after their first purchase. They go in sort of in a state of distrust, almost expecting for things to not be what they want it to be. But if it does, then they really find these surprise and delight moments and they find greater attachment to the brand. And again, about 2/3 say that when they do trust a brand, they're more likely to stay loyal and advocate. So that ability to build trust is really, really critical. So we'll talk about how we do this throughout every interaction. And the way I would encourage you all to think about this is every single moment you interact with a guest or potential guest, that's an opportunity for your brand to either build or lose trust. You could be setting your expectation and building on it or failing to deliver. And the difference between just being a property or a vacation rental and having a brand ultimately comes down to personalized experience. And that's actually a place that vacation rentals, particularly well-managed ones, can beat hotels in the guest experience. And it really starts with the first touch, right? That's your first interaction. It's about establishing your brand name, your mark, and your promise. That's where it's this vacation rental group that actually delivers that before you even necessarily get into the unit and talks about the expectations and what you believe. That's critical. From there, there's pre-booking. Even if you have an active lead, you can begin inquiring about what they're looking for, because maybe they're looking for something else in the portfolio. But even then, just engaging with them and filtering in a little bit more about who they're going to be traveling with, why they're traveling, what they're looking to do, is going to make them feel like they're having that more attentive experience and more likely to book. Once the booking is complete, you can then reach out and really get more details and inquire about their stay and their desired experience. Again, who are they traveling with? What are they traveling for? What makes up their party? Starts giving you ideas to think about those revenue enhancements that were mentioned earlier. Are there things you can offer that's going to make them have a better stay, that's going to drive your profitability, and is going to make that experience feel more comfortable for them? They're traveling with small children, no children, older children, a mix. Thinking about how you might stage a property or bring different amenities or things in there to enhance that experience is something you can do there before they arrive. Pre-arrival is another one. We've all traveled. We've all had, I'm sure, the experience of being on airlines these days. So prior to arrival, reach out to the guests to smooth the process for them, help them reduce stress, make sure they know how to get where they're going, and pre-think through their needs. The arrival itself, that's the best opportunity to exceed their expectation with personal touches. Think surprise and delight moments. If they're there for an anniversary, if they're there for something like that, they're with their children, are there little things you can do? You could have asked in advance and covered maybe for a fee, stocking the fridge, have a handwritten note waiting for them, meet them in person, whatever it looks like, that gives them that personal attention. The stay itself is all about being responsive to any issues they have and making sure that you're available to them. That departure, you want that happy guest. Make sure to reach out the day of their departure, thank them for being there, offer assistance for anything they need. And then lastly, of course, post-stay, right? They've gone home. Hopefully they've had a great experience, and thank them again and encourage those reviews, and even consider incentives to advocate, right? If they make a referral or they come back again, maybe there's something that helps you book in a weaker part of the season or something like that. So looking at all 8 of these, every single part of this is a way for your brand to behave and deepen that connection. So I know we're almost out of time, so I'm going to do this real quick, if that's okay with the Inhabit team, and then open it up for closing questions. But some 6 takeaways for this. First, travel is now a fundamental need again. It's become more accessible, convenient, scalable, and desirable. So most consumers are placing this at the top of their priorities. That means tap into the fact that guests really feeling they deserve a quality and frictionless experience. So anything you can do in the copy and in communicating with them to make them feel like, hey, this is going to be what I'm hoping it's going to be, is going to help you. From there, understand that travel is now a mechanism to enhance experiences, whether it's gig tripping to go to a show, a concert, for a friend group, whatever it is, that blended travel, building off a conference, whatever it is. Find ways to leverage local events and experiences to drive greater connection. Maybe you point out things that they can do. Maybe you're pointing out local programming and events that are happening while they're there. But anything you can do to make that a little bit better, to make their experience stronger. Personalized experience is critical. We just talked about it. Engage early and often, and think about what you can do that really speaks to their experience. Something that makes it feel like they got me is going to really drive that trust and advocacy. Brand behavior, we just talked about it with loyalty and trust. Setting those expectations important, but living your values is most important. So really build a brand promise for your properties that you're confident you can deliver consistently at the highest quality. Consider every interaction an opportunity. Empathize with your guests. Think about what you'd want. Be timely, attentive, and considerate throughout their stay. Identify those opportunities for those revenue enhancements that are going to help you and them. And then lastly, remember your brand's your strongest asset. I really want to close on this. The category has seen massive shifts in recent years. New trends are always happening. And certainly we're in a time of economic uncertainty. So in times like this, your brand strength and reputation is a key asset to maintain revenue and stability. When times are tough, when things are inconsistent, when things are changing, I'm going to stay somewhere where I know I'm going to have a good experience, or I have a referral that said they have a good experience versus something not. So think about your brand, not just about enhancing revenue now, but also creating a buffer for future growth as well. So I know I went through that a little quick. I just want to say again, thank you to the Inhabit team and for all you attending. And Scott and team, I will throw it back to you.
Well, Justin, I will say that you gave us a semester-long course in 30 minutes, so congratulations. Jordan, I think you're going to handle any questions. We have time for a couple of questions here, and then anything that after that, any of us would be happy to follow up with you all, anyone individually. So
So we have been answering the questions as they come in live. So looking at it, it looks like we have answered everybody that came in. We did have a few people that popped a Q&A just to give big compliments to everybody, especially Justin, and your presentation. That was absolutely amazing. I was over here teamsing my team about just what you were delivering. So I want to give a special thank you to Justin for able to joining us today. That was amazing. There are a few people asking about, will the slides be shared? The entire recording is going to be shared. So everything that we've presented today will be shared. We will be emailing everybody a direct link for this full recording. So just check your inboxes. We'll get that in the next couple of days, but we will be sending it to everybody who did already register. So whether you were able to attend or not, but you were able to register, we will be sending them. So yes, you will be getting a copy of the slides as well as the full input with the presentation.
Well, thank you, everyone. This has been a great webinar. We were looking forward to this, and at least from my vantage, with the addition of Justin here, it exceeded my expectations. So thank you for attending, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next presentation.